Well, I've come back over to the Giga Texas Boring Company tunnel operation after my tour over at the Bastrop facility. And I wanted to do that not only to help put into context what's going on here at Giga Texas with the tunneling operations that are underway, but I wanted to build on our discussions that we had in the part 1 of this video series about how the Boring Company uses the first principles approach to the entire gamut of the tunneling operations, and also the iterative design approach that they use for the development and production of the tunnel boring machines. One of the most important things to understand about the tunnel site here at Giga Texas is that it serves multiple purposes. Not only is it the first time that the ProofRock 3 is being used in a commercial sense, in other words, for an external customer, in this case Tesla, but it's also serving as a test bed for not only the ProofRock 3 itself, and also some of the supporting equipment, but also for some of the techniques and procedures that they are trying to develop at the Boring Company to improve the speed and operation of the tunneling. And the ProofRock 3 is the current but not future of the development of the tunnel boring machines for the Boring Company. And they're going to be looking ahead to more modern and refined versions as time goes on. And that's pretty much what the Boring Company facility out at Bastrop is all for, is to develop that future technology. But here at Giga Texas, it's not only going to be supporting the testing and validation of all of the equipment for the Boring Company, but it's also going to be providing a route or a path between this side of the highway and the other side where Giga Texas is located.
Now, it should be noted that this is not the only tunnel that will be here at Giga Texas. In fact, not even the only tunnel that will be on the south end of the factory that we're seeing being constructed right now. In the relatively near future, we're going to see more boring tunneling over at the multi-level parking garage to connect the Giga Texas factory to that structure. And there's still the Colorado River Boring Tunnel project that may be happening, and that's up in the far northeast corner next to the cathode plant under the river and over to that almost an island-like structure on the property. So with all of this information in mind, let's take a moment and summarize where we are at this point in the presentation. Now, the main purposes of the Giga Texas tunnels are to do testing, collect data, and foster further development of future tunnel boring machines for the Boring Company. This also is a great opportunity for them to operate in a non-time constrained environment, because there's a lot of construction going on the south end of Giga Texas, also the multi-level parking garage, and there is not a time constraint right now for the Boring Company to get everything completed in a certain deadline, and that allows them to do more of that testing. And also, this will establish underground routes for Tesla vehicles, pedestrian traffic, and additional access points around the site for Tesla. In addition, this is the first operational test and use of the ProofRock 3. This may also be the last place that the ProofRock 3 is used, as further development is accelerating on future tunnel boring machines like ProofRock 4. This is also to test and improve tunnel boring machine processes and procedures that they plan to use in the future, and to prove tunneling viability in varied environments. Possibly the most important part of tunneling at Giga Texas allows the Boring Company to further their iterative design process for future tunnel boring machines, with a focus on decreasing costs, which would include manufacturing, setup, teardown, operation, and transportation, increasing automation and speed of tunneling, reducing the site impact of the tunneling process, and allowing new areas for tunnels to be pursued. Now, there are two critical concepts that drive the Boring Company through their iterative design process for the tunnel boring machines. The first is a concept called continuous mining, and this is basically trying to get these tunneling operations in a way that it can continue without having to do various stops to install the ring segments. as the tunnel boring machine proceeds forward. This animation gives you an idea of how this operates currently with most tunneling boring machines. And as you can tell, the tunnel boring machine is being pushed forward by pistons. They go a certain distance into the ground, and then they need to retract those pistons back into the tunnel boring machine. And this allows the automated process to take those ring liners, assemble them, and then bring those pistons back onto the newly constructed ring and begin pushing the tunnel boring machine forward again. All of this does work now, but it does also slow down the entire process of tunneling. So they would like to try to figure out a way of eliminating those stops every approximately 5 feet or about 1.5 meters and be able to do both the liner install and tunneling at the same time. The second critical concept that drives the boring company's iterative design process for both the tunneling operations and also tunnel boring machine production, design, and manufacturing is something called Z-Pit, or zero people in tunnel. The basic idea is if you can remove as many people as possible, if not all of the people, and automate the entire tunneling process, you can remove the potential for injuries, you can remove the necessary life support equipment. It also reduces overall costs, and it can help boost the tunneling speeds. This animation gives you an idea of how the automation process works right now, where they can remove people from the tunneling process. Now, this animation is not from the boring company, but it's very similar. They do have an automatic system similar to this, where it takes the liners off the liner truck, and it is able to pick up and maneuver each of the tunnel liner segments, making a ring. And once this ring is completed, then the tunneling process can continue. Now, one of the things that is not automated right now is doing the bolts to secure each of the liners together to make that contiguous ring. Also, some of the other processes, such as maintenance or just some modifications as needed during the tunneling process, are not automated right now. And of course, this shows you what that ring segment looks like completed. In this animation, we also see that there has been some need for people to be in the tunnel to do the basically driving or navigating of the tunnel and also monitoring a lot of equipment. The boring company has removed most of this, if not all now, by placing people into control rooms nearby the tunneling operation. And in fact, at Giga Texas, you can see the control trailer right next to the boring process, the tunnel that is underway right now. And in the future, they would like to also be able to remove the people required for the control rooms and automate this to the maximum extent possible. With all of this background information in mind, let's take a look at tunneling operations and how the tunnel boring machines are installed and assembled so that we can understand some of the design choices that the boring company is making during their iterative design process to make tunneling operations more efficient. Within the tunnel, we see the tunnel boring machine highlighted in purple here at Giga Texas. This is what the Prufrock 3 tunnel boring machine looks like before it was into the tunnel. The installed liners are shown in green here, making the tunnel itself. On the top of the screen, you see liners waiting for the liner truck to pick them up to move them inside for assembly, and what it looks like here at Giga Texas. The blue item is something called a gantry, and this is the fully assembled gantries. They provide electricity, hydraulics, ventilation, support functions for the tunnel boring machine and crews. And this is what it looked like at Giga Texas before all of this was assembled inside the tunnel. With this animation, this gives you an idea of what this would look like if we were able to see the completed tunnel boring machine within the tunnel at Giga Texas. Within the tunnel, this is how the liners are delivered on a traditional tunnel and prepared for installation. Now, the boring company's iterative design has made changes here. In fact, all of the entire rail system that you see displayed here and the movement that is going on has been replaced with something called a liner truck. And the images up on the top of the screen show you what these look like here at Giga Texas. These are all electric. They use Tesla motors and batteries, and they are a critical part to the automation of the tunneling process and also reducing complexity and costs. So that was just one example of how the operations of the tunneling process can be improved. But let's take a look at the tunnel boring machines themselves and what the iterative process means for the boring company. In part one, we talked about how the Boring Company spun off from SpaceX and brought with it the first principles and iterative design process philosophies. And just like how SpaceX's development of the Starship diverges considerably from the traditional ways that other companies or NASA has developed space programs and space hardware, the Boring Company's approach to both the tunneling process and also the tunnel boring machine design and production differs as well. And one of the ways that they do this is instead of extensive planning and design work up front for years before they actually make the first version of the product, they use a more dynamic, iterative design methodology. This involves building prototypes quickly, testing the prototypes, analyzing the results, and of course, using that learned data to improve subsequent designs. Sounds a lot like Starship development down at Starbase to me. Now, the cycle of build, test, analyze, improve is repeated numerous times. This allows for accelerated development and also real-world testing of various designs. And oftentimes, this means that sometimes the testing that is being done is with obsolete versions of the product. For example, Starships, we see that they are testing, say, Ship 29 and Booster 11 right now, but those are actually obsolete designs because the version 2 for the Starship is coming up very soon. Similar with the Prufrock 3 tunnel boring machines, we're testing the Prufrock 3 at Giga Texas now, but Prufrock 4 is almost completed and Prufrock 5 is already in the advanced design stage. Here are a few of the advantages to the iterative design process. Rapid prototyping allows moving quickly from design to testing to identify design flaws or areas of improvement much earlier in the development process. It's cost-effective. Traditional approaches tend to involve large teams, extended timelines, and huge upfront costs before any return on investment is realized. The iterative approach is also more cost-effective because it allows for quicker identification and resolution of issues early in the process, which reduces overall development man hours. And of course, we've seen that with other companies and NASA's space programs. Flexibility. If a test reveals that a new avenue for improvement or shows particular features unnecessary, it can be eliminated relatively quickly. Real-world data is very important. Simulations and theoretical models are important, but they can't capture all of the variables and uncertainty in real-world conditions. And of course, the real-world data is the invaluable part of the refining design process and why the iterative process is so important. However, there are some risks and challenges associated with the iterative approach, and both the Boring Company and SpaceX needs to address these as well. One of them is safety concerns. That's the rapid prototyping could introduce some safety risk, especially if it's not managed properly. Both aerospace and tunneling projects and operations have inherent risks with them anyway. However, the quick turnaround between design and testing must be managed to not compromise the safety that may happen during that time. Now, generally, resource allocation is a positive for the iterative approach, and it can be more cost-effective. However, it can also consume significant resources, especially if multiple iterations fail to produce the desired outcomes. We've seen that to some extent with the Starship development, and to some extent, the Boring Company is seeing that as they've been developing their Prufrock 3 tunnel boring machines and moving away from buying off-the-shelf tunnel boring machines. And of course, public perception, and this is a big one that both SpaceX and the Boring Company face from time to time, and that is with the visible nature of the iterative testing, some people may not understand what they are seeing or how it is working, and they may conclude that, especially if there's spectacular failures, that the system is just not working and it is being done improperly. That's usually not the case, but public perception is a big issue that is related to the iterative design process. Back in 2019, the Boring Company purchased their first tunnel boring machine. It was a Godot, and this is an image of what that looked like. It was made by Lovat. Before that, they used third-party tunnel boring machines. In 2017, they did their very first tunnel It was a 1.14 mile or 1.83 kilometer high-speed tunnel in Hawthorne, California at the SpaceX headquarters and manufacturing facility. But it was pretty clear at that time that buying off-the-shelf tunnel boring machines using the old technology was expensive, it was slow, and there was a lot of room for improvement and to start applying their first principles approach to the tunneling operations and specifically how the tunnel boring machines were manufactured. In 2020, in September, the Proof Rock 1 was constructed. It was used in Alianto, California. The upper left gives you an image of what that looked like. It was mostly just used for testing and operational development for the boring company at that time. Then, in just 2 years later, in August of 2022, the Proof Rock 2 was manufactured at Bastrop, Texas. It was used for the 2 test tunnels that are at the Bastrop facility that we talked about in part 1. And they are also being used for the Las Vegas loop, and that continues today, and that entire loop system is not only operational, but it's expanding and it's becoming one of the largest ones in the world of its kind. Proof Rock 3 was developed and manufactured at the Bastrop site in September 2023 up until present. It was moved over to Giga Texas, where we see it in operation earlier this year. And it's very likely that this will be the only place for the Proof Rock 3 because, as you can see in the bottom right of the screen, Proof Rock 4 is almost finished, and it is in the final stages of its production process. And this has many new updates and upgrades from what we see in the Proof Rock 3. And also, the next generation beyond Proof Rock 4 is in the final design stages. So a lot of progress using that iterative approach. You can also see by the timelines that the time between each of the iterations is getting shorter and shorter. And as I mentioned, similarities with SpaceX, it mimics exactly what we're seeing with the Starship development and how it is moving through the various ships on version 1 and the boosters and preparing to go to version 2 in the near future. So what are some of the innovations that the Boring Company is bringing to the tunneling process? Here's a great example. What you're seeing with this animation is this large pit that is used for most tunneling operations. And it takes a lot of time. They have to make this concrete foundation. They have this access point for the tunnel boring machine. It needs to be lowered down in, assembled within the pit. It takes up a lot of space for the site as well. So instead, the Boring Company has innovated. Instead of using that large pit, it has something called the porpoising process. And you can see with this diagram from the Boring Company how it generally works. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the tunnel boring machine is delivered. It is set up. It begins tunneling right there, and by just porpoising into the ground, it goes through the ground to the point where it will be exiting, and it kind of porpoises right out of the ground. And from that point, it is picked back up, it is put back onto the transport, and it's able to depart. And this also uses a lot less space on both the entry and the exit points for the tunnel. This is a good view at Giga Texas of what the Proof Rock 3 looked like as it was being set up. There is a small degree of a pit here that is partly because of a berm that was in that location. But as you can tell, there was no humongous pit that was involved. Now, the process did take a lot longer than would be expected because, again, this is mostly for testing of setting up the Proof Rock 3 for the first time and also testing and refining their operational procedures. Let's look at some real-world examples of how this works. This is the Proof Rock 2 tunnel boring machine out at Las Vegas. This has just exited the tunnel. You can see that they're using a dirt ramp to help with the porpoising process. And although this is a functional and workable solution, the iterative design process is continuing to refine this. And what they're going to try to do with the Proof Rock 3, 4, and on is to eliminate the need for dirt ramps altogether. And that will involve some new technology and new vehicles that are under development right now. In this image, we see how Proof Rock 2 is currently transported, and it requires a heavy jig that it is secured to, and that jig is moved by two SPMTs, or self-propelled modular transporters, very similar to what we see at Starbase to move the boosters and the ships around the site. Now, this is very complex. It's expensive. It involves multiple different pieces of equipment. So the iterative design process for Prufrock 3, 4, and beyond is to eliminate all of this equipment, the need for the SPMTs completely. And the way they're going to do that is that they have a new vehicle that is kind of like a cross between a dump truck and a SPMT, where it's able to do the porpoising without ramps for the Prufrock tunnel boring machine to begin the tunneling. And then when it exits, it's just able to drive right up onto that vehicle, and then it lowers it down and drives away without having all of this extra equipment. These two images give great examples of how the innovations of porpoising and smaller overall tunnel diameters make a big difference on the environment and open up new locations where traditional methods cannot work for the entry and exit of the tunnels. You can see on the left, right next to a golf course, they were able to do the tunneling without any impact to the golf course operation. And then downtown Las Vegas, same thing with the roadways. And here are some contrasting examples of large excavation pits that most traditional tunnel boring machines need. You can imagine something like this really does restrict where and how the tunneling operations can commence. So this is a great example of the innovation and that iterative approach that the boring company is using for tunneling operations. And just taking a look at the Prufrock 3 and its initial setup here at Giga Texas is just a good way to maybe bring to a close the discussion that we've been having here on part 2 of the Boring Company, its processes, its design philosophies, and also what we're expecting to see here at Giga Texas, not only with this one tunnel, but also in the future with additional tunnels around the site.
So that's a quick tour here at Giga Texas of the tunneling operations that are underway at this site, and some of the new details about what is going on here that I learned today. And I just want to say thank you again to the Boring Company for giving me the tour and helping me fill in some of the blanks that I didn't know about this operation, and I hope that you found that informative as well.
And finally, don't forget to take a look at part 1 if you haven't seen that. We talk a lot about the Bastrop facility for the Boring Company and a lot of the design considerations that they use for building these tunnels. As always, thank you very much for watching. I do appreciate it. Hope you have a great day.